Today, the defense rested its case in the Alex Murdaugh trial, but not before some graphic, gruesome testimony from two forensic experts who took the stand and broke down in excruciating detail the shots and wounds that killed Murdaugh's wife Maggie and son Paul at the family farm. In the wake of Alex Murdaugh's testimony, the defense tried to end its case by proving that the prosecution's theory just doesn't hold up, and trying to show, based on the height of the shooter, that it simply could not have been Alex Murdaugh, who's 6'4".
Yes, this is the only shot I disagree. It just seems very odd that when you have one going this way, you have to be in a very bizarre position to be able to get it to go up.
The defense's forensic pathologist also said Paul was shot at close range with a shotgun to the back of the head, which differs from the state's account that Paul was shot sort of in an upward motion, but not at close range.
There's no skull here. That's probably the area where the shotgun was pressed against the head. And we've got all of these fractures. This is, textbook for a contact range shotgun wound to the head, to the top of the head.
Throughout the disturbing testimony, Alex Murdaugh rocked back and forth, wiping tears from his eyes. His son, Buster Murdaugh, in court, listening closely as well. This testimony set up the next defense witness, a blood spatter expert who testified on the amount of blood and other biological matter, you can understand what that means, that such a close-range shot would produce. They said covering the shooter and maybe even injuring them.
You can see outside and even in throughout the feet area in multiple and many large pieces of skull. We also saw large amounts of tissue that were projected all the way up onto the ceiling and the door. You see hair all the way up into the door, and of course you see blood literally everywhere. So I think minimally, that shooter is getting covered with this material, getting more or less the shock wave of that effect, and more than likely getting hit with at least something that could have done injury, a bone fragment.
But there was no evidence of a huge amount of blood or brain matter on Alex Murdaugh's clothes, and he was not injured, which led the defense to once again raise the possibility that two shooters killed Paul and Maggie.
To me, there's structurally difficult for the same shooter to have two long arms and no practical reason for that to happen. Add that to what I believe happened to the shooter who fired first with the shotgun, and I think it tips in favor of the probability of two shooters.
Also today, the judge ruled the jury will get to visit the crime scene at the Murdaugh family property called Moselle before deliberations begin. Prosecution actually opposed the trip, saying the property had changed since the killings. Additional testimony would be needed because of those changes, but the trip will take place, and it's going to be soon. The judge says it would occur after the prosecution wraps up the next phase of its presentation. It's expected to begin calling rebuttal witnesses tomorrow morning. Joining us once again, Jesse Weber, lawyer and host of Law and Crime Network. He's been following the case closely. All right, Jesse, let's start with the two-shooter theory. How did it come across today?
I think this raises more questions for the jury. Even from the beginning, the idea you had two separate weapons, both victims, no defensive wounds. They were surprised by the shooter. And then the testimony today that the blowback from Paul would have been so severe that the shooter would have been stunned. The idea of him grabbing him or her, grabbing another weapon and immediately killing the second victim, I think it gives jurors pause, especially when you see deficits in the prosecution's case, mistakes in the police investigation. The jury might be trying to fill in some of those holes.
So are you now saying you think a possibility for an all-out acquittal?
I'm saying still hung jury.
Okay.
I flip back and forth in this case. I think there are great things for the prosecution and great things for the defense, even with Alex Murdaugh taking the stand.
Yeah, all right. Site visit, how significant?
I think that's important because it creates a visual for the jury. And more importantly, they're going to try to understand how quick can someone get from the kennels back to the main house, right? Based on Alex Murdaugh's testimony. And I guarantee you, they're probably also going to look around that property and say, okay, so if Alex Murdaugh left, where else could someone be hiding out to jump in 3 minutes after he left?
Thank you for watching. Go to NewsNationNow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.